Sun Tzu never wrote about office politics, but his principles reveal why some people get promoted while others, equally talented, remain invisible to decision-makers. There's a war happening in every office, whether you see it or not. The promoted aren't the hardest workers. They're the few who understand positioning, and the many who disappear into the background the moment they clock in. Not because they're lazy, not because they're incompetent, but because they carry habits that scream one thing: strategic irrelevance. Sun Tzu didn't write for the foot soldiers. He wrote for the generals, the ones who understood that victory isn't about fighting harder, it's about fighting smarter. And when you carry these 12 mistakes, you don't just get overlooked for promotions. You become invisible to decision-makers, to opportunities, to the very people who control your career trajectory. Let's discuss about the invisible problem revelation. It starts with the first mistake. You mistake activity for strategy. When a strategic professional enters the office, their awareness expands. They scan the power dynamics, assess the political landscape, identify the real decision-makers. But when someone trapped in task mode walks in, they collapse into their to-do list. Their energy focuses downward on spreadsheets instead of outward on influence networks. Their eyes track deadlines instead of mapping opportunity. To the strategically minded, this person doesn't exist on the advancement radar. Not even worth considering for leadership. Because if you don't understand the game being played, why should anyone put you in a position to play it? Your work quality is not your weapon. Your strategic positioning is. Disappear into your tasks and your enemies need not sabotage you. You've eliminated yourself from consideration. Working in an office is your first test. Your awareness should expand beyond your desk, your conversations should connect beyond your department, and your value should project strategically, not just tactically. Don't wait to be noticed for your work. Position yourself to be remembered for your strategic thinking. This is what happens when you speak without strategic weight. Even when your ideas are solid, your delivery gives you away. The tentative phrasing, the excessive qualification, the apologetic tone when presenting to leadership. It doesn't matter how brilliant your analysis is if it sounds like you're seeking permission to think strategically. Strategic leaders will dismiss you within seconds. You think you're being thorough, but what they hear is, "I don't trust my own strategic judgment. I need validation before acting." To Sun Tzu, communication was warfare by other means. Measured, intentional, decisive. Not hesitant, not over-explained, and never performed for consensus. Train your delivery to be confident, concise, and final. Present insights with conviction, not apology. Let strategic silence carry your authority. Never dilute your recommendations just to sound collaborative, because the moment you stop sounding uncertain about strategy, decision-makers start taking your counsel seriously. Learn celebrating small tactical wins. Recognition is a strategic signal. When you get excited about completing projects, hitting deadlines, or solving routine problems, you're signaling, "I'm satisfied with tactical execution. I'm not thinking bigger." But Sun Tzu would have warned, the one who celebrates minor victories reveals they don't understand the larger war. Strategic leaders test you through scope. They mention bigger challenges, broader initiatives, company-wide problems. And then they wait. Not to see if you can handle them, but to see if you recognize them as opportunities worth pursuing. The moment you light up about small wins while staying quiet about strategic challenges, they've categorized you. You'll never be seen as leadership material again. Don't celebrate completion, celebrate strategic impact. If something doesn't move the organizational needle, acknowledge it and move on. Show enthusiasm for challenges that matter to the business, not just tasks that matter to your performance review. Don't over-explaining your strategic thinking. You're asked for your recommendation, you answer, and then keep going, adding context, disclaimers, alternative scenarios, and backup plans. Not because it's needed, but because you feel the need to justify your strategic authority. This mistake makes you invisible because it screams insecurity about your own judgment. Strategic leaders don't have time for people who narrate their decision-making process like a case study they didn't ask for. You think, if I just explain my reasoning clearly enough, they'll see I'm strategic. But they think, if he needs this many words to make a point, his thinking isn't clear enough for leadership. As Sun Tzu would say, supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. In corporate terms, supreme strategic communication consists of making your point without explaining how you got there. Let your recommendations be brief and decisive. Present conclusions, then stop. Let strategic silence carry the weight. Speak like your strategic time is valuable. Let them ask if they want more detail. Waiting for strategic assignments. You sit in meetings but don't speak unless the topic directly relates to your department. You wait for leadership to specifically ask for your strategic input. You hope someone will invite you into higher-level planning discussions. This is the death of strategic presence because it broadcasts, "I'm not sure I belong in strategic conversations. Can someone else decide if my thinking matters?" Strategic professionals never wait for permission to think bigger. They insert strategic perspective into discussions. Not arrogantly, but decisively. Because they understand, strategic value doesn't knock, it demonstrates. Don't ask, "Should I share my thoughts on this?" Share strategic insights that add value, then return to listening. Let your contribution elevate the conversation. The ones who hesitate are forgotten. The ones who add strategic value once with precision are remembered. Apologizing for your strategic standards. You have opinions about direction, priorities, and resource allocation. But the moment someone questions your strategic judgment, you soften. You explain. You backtrack. Whether it's about project priorities, strategic timelines, or resource requirements, you treat your professional judgment like something that needs defending. Sun Tzu understood that strategic standards are not about preferences, they're about winning. If you apologize for your strategic judgment, you make it seem arbitrary. If you stand by it quietly, you make it seem authoritative. Present strategic recommendations without flinching. Decline poor strategic directions without extensive justification. Hold your ground on resource requirements without signaling flexibility you don't have. When your strategic judgment is delivered without apology, it becomes leadership material. And leadership material commands respect, not consensus. Don't overpraising lateral colleagues. You think strategic relationship building means constant positive reinforcement. You say things like, "Great point," or "excellent analysis," to maintain harmony and show you're a team player. But Sun Tzu would tell you, praise when given too freely loses its strategic weight and signals the desire to be liked, not the strength to lead. When you flood colleagues with validation, strategic leaders see someone trying to manage relationships. Through appreciation, which means you need social approval, which means you can be influenced through acceptance. Withhold praise until it carries strategic weight. Deliver recognition like a strategic resource, not a social lubricant. Make it specific, meaningful, and slightly delayed. When you speak admiration with strategic discipline, it stops being noise. It becomes influence. And strategic leaders listen to influence, not validation. Don't mirror leadership style too much. You match their communication style, their priorities, their strategic language. You subtly adjust your approach to align with theirs. You think you're building strategic rapport, but what you're building is strategic invisibility. Because the more you reflect someone else's strategic thinking, the less your own strategic voice emerges. And the moment your strategic identity becomes adaptive, they stop seeing you as a strategic peer. To strategic leaders, unconscious mirroring screams, "I'll become whatever strategic thinker you need me to be. Just don't exclude me from important decisions." Keep your natural strategic perspective, even if it creates tension. Don't match strategic priorities just to smooth alignment. Let there be productive disagreement. Only people with strategic confidence stay solid in the presence of different viewpoints. And that strategic solidity creates respect. Mistake number 9, always showing gratitude first. Yes, appreciation is important, but like any strategic tool, timing matters. If you thank leadership before establishing your strategic presence, you position yourself as subordinate. Phrases like, "Thanks for including me," or "I appreciate the opportunity to contribute," sound professional. But Sun Tzu would see them as strategic confession. "I believe this interaction benefits me more than it benefits the organization." That single power imbalance makes you smaller strategically, even if you're talented, capable, and insightful. Delay gratitude. Establish strategic value first. Contribute strategic thinking before expressing appreciation. Let the interaction reveal mutual strategic benefit before showing deference. Because when you enter strategic discussions thanking people for letting you participate, you reinforce the belief that you didn't belong there strategically. Mistake number 10. Seeking consensus in strategic decisions. You enter strategic discussions looking for agreement. You read the room before taking positions. You measure reactions to your strategic recommendations and adjust mid-presentation, softening your stance or walking back your convictions. You do this because you want strategic harmony. But here's the Sun Tzu reality. He who fears strategic conflict will always serve the one who doesn't. Real strategic leaders create productive tension without flinching. They enter discussions and present recommendations that challenge assumptions. They ask strategic questions that unsettle. They allow strategic discomfort because they are not dependent on unanimous agreement. When you constantly try to keep strategic discussions smooth, you become a strategic facilitator, not a strategic leader. Let people feel strategically challenged by your thinking. Let your recommendations create productive tension. Let strategic silence stretch while people process. Let the moment breathe strategically, even if it creates discomfort. Mistake number 11. Avoiding strategic ownership of space. You sit quietly in strategic meetings, minimize your strategic presence, and defer to others' strategic frameworks. This isn't strategic humility, it's strategic submission. Your strategic presence speaks before your strategic words arrive. Strategic leaders see someone with strategic insights but no strategic presence as tactically useful but strategically irrelevant. Present your strategic thinking like you belong in strategic conversations. Don't shrink when strategic attention turns to you. Let strategic focus rest on your ideas naturally. Your strategic posture trains your strategic mindset. When your presence commands strategic attention, your thinking begins to match. Mistake number 12. Over-identifying with good strategic intentions. This one's crucial because most people are convinced their good strategic intentions will carry them. They think, "I didn't mean to sound tactically focused. I meant to think strategically." But strategic leadership doesn't care what you meant strategically. It only responds to what you signal strategically. Over-identifying with your strategic good intentions creates blind spots. You assume others should recognize your strategic potential, your strategic depth, your strategic commitment. But Sun Tzu would say, Strategic goodness without strategic perception is strategically useless. Strategic intentions are invisible. Strategic behavior is everything. Strategic leaders don't decode your strategic soul. They respond to strategic demonstration. If you come across as tactically focused or strategically uncertain, they don't investigate why. They just conclude you're not strategically ready. Stop thinking you'll be rewarded for strategic intentions. Start owning how you come across strategically. You've now seen the complete strategic picture. 12 invisible mistakes, each one quietly removing you from strategic consideration by those who control advancement, opportunity, and organizational direction. But now you know. You can't unsee these strategic blind spots. You can't unknown what your strategic behavior is communicating when you think you're being collaborative or thorough. You're not being collaborative strategically. You're being invisible strategically. When you eliminate these strategic mistakes, something shifts. You don't just participate in strategic discussions. Strategic discussions begin to revolve around your input. Eyes adjust to your strategic perspective because suddenly there's strategic thinking they can't ignore. A professional who carries no strategic apology, no tactical limitations, no consensus-seeking hesitation. Only strategic weight, only strategic presence, only strategic signal. And in Sun Tzu's world of organizational warfare, that's how strategic leaders emerge. You were never meant to be strategically invisible. But the corporate world teaches tactical focus early. Work hard. Be reliable. Follow directions. Wait for recognition. So you complied. You focused tactically. You dulled your strategic voice. You made your strategic thinking easier to ignore until even you forgot it was there. But Sun Tzu would call this strategic self-elimination. Not humility, not diligence, but slow strategic death. Strategic leaders learned differently. They realized that strategic advancement is not earned through tactical excellence, or by quietly doing strategic work, or by waiting for someone to recognize their strategic potential. They understood something most professionals never will. Strategic visibility is not given to the most capable. It is claimed by the most strategically positioned. Now you must begin the complete elimination of these 12 strategic mistakes from your professional behavior and replace them with strategic edge, strategic weight, strategic presence so sharp it makes decision makers reconsider how they categorize you. Here's what strategic presence looks like. You enter strategic discussions not seeking agreement but contributing strategic value. You speak when you have strategic insight, not when invited. You let your strategic recommendations end in conviction, not questions. You don't seek strategic warmth, you radiate strategic gravity. You don't mirror strategic thinking, you anchor strategic discussions. You don't rush to fill strategic gaps, you let strategic silence test their thinking. And when someone tries to diminish your strategic input, whether through dismissal, redirection, or tactical reduction, you don't defend. You don't explain. You don't adjust. You simply continue thinking strategically. Because that's what strategic visibility really is. Not approval, not consensus, not validation. It's strategic indispensability. The feeling that if they ignore your strategic thinking, they might miss something crucial. And so they listen. They ask for your strategic perspective. They include you in strategic planning. They consider your strategic recommendations not because you forced them to, but because your strategic value left no other option. From this moment forward, never again believe that tactical excellence is your strategic currency. It's strategic positioning. And strategic positioning is built by elimination of these strategic mistakes. What remains? Your strategic core. Undeniable, unshakable, strategically unignorable. Because once these strategic mistakes are eliminated, there is no more strategic camouflage, only strategic signal, only strategic force, only the quiet strategic gravity of someone who doesn't perform strategic thinking. They embody strategic leadership. And when that's who you become professionally, even the most strategic leaders in the organization will recognize it. Because you're no longer just in strategic meetings, you've become the strategic center without even trying.